Section 5.5 takes a lot of the things that we already know and just sort of combines them into one big lesson. We'll talk a lot about corresponding parts. We'll talk a lot about overlapping triangles. Then you get your homework. Tomorrow we're doing an in-class activity. We're not doing the notes just because today's kind of crazy. I predict we will have school tomorrow.
Hopefully we don't.
But we will do these notes then next Monday. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is this guy right here. So you can just write this abbreviation. You'll see it come up every now and then in things like proofs or in reasons why we know things are congruent. It's called CPCTC. It stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. We've already talked about that. That's one of the first things we learned in this chapter is that if you have two triangles that are congruent, the corresponding parts are congruent. So it's just kind of learning a little shorthand. So once you have it in your notes once, now anytime we use that as a justification, you can just put CPCTC. So you can go ahead and draw these. This says, tell which triangles you need to show are congruent in order to show that the given statements are congruent. So, why don't you go ahead and draw number 1? There's like 3 different types of questions today, 3 examples of each. So let's just put the first one of each type in your notes. That way you have each type once. All right, so this is saying if I wanted to show that this angle was congruent to this angle, which 2 triangles would have to be congruent? If I want to show that angle A is congruent to angle C, which 2 triangles would I have to show are congruent?
B and D.
Triangles have 3 letters.
Oh, wait.
A, B, D.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
A, B, D would have to match with which one?
B, C, D.
Okay, if A and C are congruent, they have to be in the same spot.
B, C, D.
So if we start with
C,
A, we have to start, so C, B, D. The corresponding parts have to be in the same spot. So since we want A and C to be congruent, they both have to be in the same position. Now, number 2 does some of the work for you. They're saying if M and P, so M and P, this angle over here, is congruent to Q and P. Well, they already put it in the right order for us. So the triangles that would have to be congruent here are triangle M and P and triangle Q and P. So sometimes they do the work for you. All right, check out number 3. So this is saying if I want segment QR to be congruent to RT, what triangles would need to be congruent? So I'm going to right away put these 2 in front and these 2 in front because the corresponding parts are in the same spot. So QR, what letter do I need from that top triangle still? P, good. So QRP and then TRS, yep. So again, you can use the clues that they give you to put things in the right order. Any questions on these 3? So once again, why don't you go ahead and draw the first one. I'll give you a minute. But basically this section is all about triangles that are right on top of each other. And what we're going to do is we're going to like peel them apart. So the directions say to sketch the overlapping triangles separately. That's really the hard part, I think. Mark all congruent angles and sides. All right. So the two triangles here, I'm going to trace them in different colored highlighters. So do you see this one right here? Okay. That triangle is going to be congruent to this triangle. They're the two big overlapping triangles. So the first step is to draw them separately. So here's the red one. And here's the blue one. Okay. Now, it says to label the parts that we know are congruent. So I know that CF and FC would be congruent, right? So I can mark those, since they were the same segment up here. And then it also gives me this information that DF and EC are congruent. So mark those as well. Some people go a step further and they say, oh, well, this is HL, and then they mark everything congruent. If you want to do that, that's fine. But the minimum requirement is to label the parts that are given as congruent. Questions on number 4? All right, the next two you can just follow along with for practice. But once again, I have two triangles. I have this one, which I'm going to highlight in blue. And I would recommend you use the highlighters today if you want to go grab some as you're doing your homework. And that one in red. So I have C, F, D. And then the blue one is C, F, E. Okay, now what segment was in both to start off with? See that segment up there? All right, so I'm going to mark that as being congruent in each. And then they already told me that CD and EF were congruent. And then the directions tell me that DCF, so this angle right here, matches with EFC, which is this angle over here. All right, and last one. I've got the red guy. And I've got the blue guy. For the red, I got FCD. F, C, D. I've got the blue, F, C, E. These angles up top were labeled congruent. This segment is the same in both. And then the additional information is that E, F, C, so EFC down here is congruent to DCF, so that'd be right up here. So it's a lot of visualizing, it's a lot of peeling apart, it's a lot of going back and seeing what you knew the first time and marking it true the second time. So I would just recommend going slow on these, using highlighters, using crayons, using colored pencils. Just use what you can to help you visualize what's going on. Questions? All right, we got one more type. So go ahead, probably 7 is, just as easy as the other ones. So this is telling you, it says, tell which triangle congruence postulate or theorem you would use to show the corresponding parts are congruent. So if I wanted to show that KLM, so this angle right here, was congruent to angle NQM, this angle right here, what congruence postulate would you use? Well, we've been doing this for like 2 weeks, right? Before I labeled those, what did we have? Like these sides, these sides, these sides. So which postulate would you use? Side, side, side.
That's pretty obvious.
Yeah, these we've been doing.
What?
They're just, I think the difference today is the triangles are a little more overlapped than they were previously. Maybe just like a notch harder. But I don't think it's too bad. All right, so on number 8, you can see that this is the same in both, and that's actually a hypotenuse. So we have the right triangles, we have the hypotenuse. Do we have the legs?
Yes.
Yeah, they're right here. Okay, so this is hypotenuse, leg. All right, and then the last one. This segment, JM, is in both, so I'm going to label it. So if I focus on each triangle, I have an angle, then an angle, then a side, right? Like this guy. Okay, so that's AAS. All right, that is it for today. Today, we learned. I'm going to shorten it using that little shortcut we learned. It's called CPCTC. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Something we've known. Now we have a fancy name for it. All right, I'll leave that up there while you catch up.